And here we are with the 10th and final show in this series, Einstein and God. And we're going to explore creation 114 and 115. Dan, give us a look ahead.
Our sun is born to shine forth upon the earth, and dry land appears. A garment of fleece and a veil of fine linen are given her as she prepares to embrace man.
Wow. This is really going to be cool because here, the last show in the nature of God really is the foundation for what could be another series about the creation of humans.
Indeed.
And so with that, I'm going to read creation 114 and 115.
The creating word has been spoken. Now there was another command, and the power going forth smote the sun, so its face was lit, and it shone with a great radiance, pouring warmth and light upon its sister earth. Henceforth she would live within the protection of her brother's household, rejoicing in his benevolence and strength. The waters upon the bosom of the earth were gathered together, and dry land appeared. When the covering of water was rolled back, the body of earth was unstable, damp, and yielding. The face of the sun shone down kindly upon his sister, and the dry land of her body became very hard. Humidity and dampness were taken away. He gave her a garment of fleece and a veil of fine linen, that she might clothe her body with modesty.
You know, Dan, as I look at these two passages, creation 114 and 115, I'm beginning to wonder whether or not this was something that was really part of the sons of fire, or if the ancient Egyptians who penned this were starting to delve into their own belief system. What do you think about that?
I think that from my understanding of the compilation of the Kolbrin, that it was a assembled set of works that had been penned by countries, nations, races of people other than their own. They did not incorporate their own beliefs into it because they were trying to find out why their pantheon of gods had failed them so miserably.
Right, at Exodus, yeah.
Right.
The Hebrew God had defeated them, and they did. They went. That was the reason for the creation of the first version, the Great Book, as it was that they were actually going to the extent of their trading realm and trying to learn folklore and wisdom, not so much that they would be able to find a way to ingratiate themselves with the God of the Jews, but rather that they could go to the next level, the God above that God, which they were unsuccessful in doing.
Mm-hmm.
But still the same, they're still powerful material because this really does set the foundation for how the Kolbrin is tackling us, if you will, our beginnings. And with that, let's dive into creation 114, verse 1.
The creating word has been spoken. Now there was another command, and the power going forth smote the sun, so its face was lit, and it shone with a great radiance, pouring warmth and light upon its sister earth.
The same word, the vibrational sequence issued forth from the mind and body of God, takes form and creates gravity. Gravity has its effect upon the pre-sun body of hydrogen and creates nuclear fusion. The first helium atoms are created from this process, and a brilliant and fiery heat bursts forth from the surface, providing gentle heat upon the earth. This is what we know as nuclear fusion. It is how our sun works. And it was given at another creating word. However, it's past tense. It does say the creating word had been spoken.
Mm-hmm.
And it is perhaps that it's now just manifesting itself in compressing the hydrogen gas so far, and the gravity, or that gravitational pull, is heating up this ball of hydrogen. So we see nuclear fusion occur, which hydrogen fusing or hydrogen burning creates helium. And this is what the releasing of that energy in fusion is what creates the radiant energy of our sun. And it's very poetically stated about how it's pouring out its warmth and light upon its sister Earth.
That's right. And you know, this is something where we first were introduced to the concept of heat in a previous show. And this seems to be a very logical next step in that chain of thought.
It does.
And so with that, let's dive into creation 114, verse 2.
Henceforth she would live within the protection of her brother's household, rejoicing in his benevolence and strength.
This verse, I think, delves into the question of, is matter eternal or not, again, because it seems to suggest that the earth will forever be a satellite of our sun. And I believe we answered that matter is only repurposed, it never goes away. So again, it could very well, for a very long time, be a satellite of our sun. But we know that all things change and suns die. And matter is changed and repurposed. And so, while she basks in the safety of her stable brother, change is inevitable for Earth and men alike.
And this one says to me that they understood quite a bit, but they didn't foresee the end of the sun, at least as a benign light source.
I agree. Here they see it's going to forever, which is interesting because they had other writings that even this particular, the source of this, should have had other writings about interruptions in the solar system as we knew it. Which is, but I don't know, maybe that person didn't read those other writings when they wrote it.
Or maybe it was just something that was cobbled together. You know, we have to keep in mind the wisdom texts that the Celts had gathered. They had the Coal Book and they had the Bronze Book. But when the Glastonbury Abbey was sacked and burned, they gathered what they could. They didn't have everything. And so we could be missing something here that would add perspective to it. And I would just caution readers that, again, the Kolbrin is a compilation of surviving texts. So sometimes you can jump conceptually to someplace you don't see in advance. And I think that's important, particularly especially if we look at how this progresses with the next verse, creation 115, verse 1.
The waters upon the bosom of the earth were gathered together, and dry land appeared.
This is a very interesting verse referencing the waters. There's a reason. In many wisdom texts, the word waters is the English word for the fine mist from which substance or matter is created. So we could take this one of two ways. One, the physical waters parted as dry land, heaving its way above the waters, or the fine mist gathered together to form dry land on the earth. However, we need not search far for an answer. The next verse decides this for us.
Well, then let's get to the next verse, which is creation 1:15-2.
When the covering of water was rolled back, the body of earth was unstable, damp, and yielding.
Our earth was unusual, having a liquid water surface, and as such, as the earth shaped its hardening crust, the land heaved upward and parted the waters, leaving a damp and yielding surface. This answers the question from the previous verse that it was actually the physical waters parted as dry land heaved its way above the waters.
Which is absolutely, that's scientifically correct. And continents rise up and water is displaced. So that is consistent. Well, let's go on to the next one. Creation 1:15, verse 3.
The face of the sun shone down kindly upon his sister, and the dry land of her body became very hard. Humidity and dampness were taken away.
The gentle warmth of the sun dried out the land masses, causing it to become firm. The evaporation of water would have created an atmosphere that adds a beautiful aura to the earth when seen from space. I really like the poetic nature that they're speaking of here, or speaking with, about earth being the sister of a stronger brother who is taking care of her. I think it reflects part of the nature of the people and their perspective of how they see creation and how they see God, as per maybe they have already met God themselves.
That is a good issue. That's a good point. Let's move into Creation 1:15, verse 4.
He gave her a garment of fleece and a veil of fine linen, that she might clothe her body with modesty.
I like the picture of Earth being a female clothing herself in modesty. The Greeks believed that Earth was a feminine spirit called Gaia. Perhaps they get the feminine nature of the Earth from this text. It would have been wonderful to have seen all this take place, to have been there. You and I both know that. We long to have been there. The universe is such a profoundly beautiful place. It is a reflection of a very amazing and wonderful God. And this leads me to our God question from the last show.
And I believe this is, for me, one of the most, if not the most interesting God questions. So let's go to God question. For those of you who are just now coming into the series, please go to the first show. That's going to help you out with understanding the readings. And also keep in mind the readings are provided purely as a reference. Now, we're going to give you the reading from the previous show, show number 9. This was Dan's question.
God, what is the most misunderstood thing about God?
The least understood things about me come from the manipulations of dogma and doctrine. Religious institutions coerce obedience. They present me as difficult to understand, vengeful, and punitive. You have known me through readings beginning in 2014. Have you observed these fear-based angry behaviors? No, God, I never have. Rather, I found what defines your character perfectly, that being pleasant persistence. A good assessment of my interest, support, and love, which you have grown to realize and present.
Of all the readings I've done for this series, this was the most unique because this was a time when I got a question in return. And about what I have experienced in my relationship with Creator. Dan, what did you think about the manipulations of dogma and doctrine?
Marshall, this is the God I know. I believe that and to read it. The least understood things about me come from the manipulations of dogma and doctrine. For to come to a certain end, whether that's for money or control or to serve someone's ego or because they are wounded and they need to pass on wounds and vengeance. There's many different reasons, but he answers it as who he is here. He's not difficult to understand. He's easy to know. And he's not vengeful and he's not punitive. And I really love this answer. He says, you know, you have known me through readings beginning in 2014. Have you observed these fear-based anger behaviors? And it's like, no, I haven't observed that with you, Father. You know, and you're going, you said the same thing, which would have been my answer as well. But he says, that's a good assessment of my interest, support, and love, which you have grown to realize and present. That's beautiful. That is really beautiful. I love the answer to this
So
question.
do I. And like you, that is the God I know. And, you know, when we were preparing the series, you and I had a discussion about Einstein and God, and you had some interesting ideas. And the more I thought about it, the more I felt that given that we are talking about a stereoscopic fusion of science and spirituality, that this needed to be the final note in the series, that being Einstein and God. And so please share your thoughts with the viewers that you shared with me.
Marshall, in this series, we did use a combination of science and spirituality to review the book of creation. The difference between the two is a paradigm. With spirituality, you know what you know. And with science, there is only one absolute. Everything can and does change over time. When Einstein envisioned the nature of space-time, it was not through a science experiment, though one was used to prove Einstein correct. Rather, Einstein had a moment of inspiration in which he saw all, an epiphany, if you want to call it. And then he spent the rest of his life compressing a view of the multiverse that he saw into the two-dimensional limitations of a language. That has to be frustrating.
Very, very. Been there, done that, bought all the t-shirts.
A question I like to ask is, did Einstein envision the nature of space and time by accessing the Akasha records when he saw all? The only reason I ask this question is because many Nobel laureates have gone beyond science to explore spirituality for answers where science lags. There's an interesting comparison in the blockbuster series called Star Trek. According to renowned psychic and author Phyllis V. Schleimer, the true source of Gene Roddenberry's inspiration for Star Trek came from the Akashic records. So if Einstein and Roddenberry could access the Akashic records and achieve such important works, what happens when humanity evolves? Will the Einsteins and Roddenberrys of the world become commonplace?
That question that you posed to me defines the whole issue of evolution. That as we evolve, we have people who are able to connect with the wisdom of the cosmos, with Creator, with the Akashic record. We just simply can see more. It's, you know, we grow up and we can see over the fence, if you will. And that's what it comes to me. And so this really feels natural to me, a progression, a sense of hope. And I think that is the most important thing. As the publisher of the Kolbrin Bible, it is a humbling experience for me because countless generations of men and women have worked so diligently and so hard to save this information and to transport it through time across many ages and many risks. And so I'm merely standing upon their shoulders. And I love it for the same reasons that they did. It's this eternal search for wisdom. If we want to know God, we have to look for wisdom. It's just that simple.
I agree. It has been a pleasure.
It has been for me, Dan. Been a wonderful series. God bless.